This is something I learned, and I'll say this, because it's medicine and lives are at stake, you're afraid to fail. And failure is not accepted because, yes, lives really are at stake. But here, I felt like I could try things. And if they didn't work, I didn't really necessarily see them as failure. I just realized that I needed to either pivot or I needed to use that as like a stepping stone to get me to success or to get me to winning or growth.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today, we have another incredible guest, Dr. Nkem. So good to speak with you tonight. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to get this conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking your time on your day off in Nashville to have a conversation with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad I'm here. I really mean it. I'm excited to just talk about all things real estate investing and medicine as well, and just make sure that we can give value to the listeners.
Well, I know that there'll definitely be a lot of value, so really looking forward to it. Do you mind just kind of telling folks a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Nkem. I'm originally from Nigeria. I live in Nashville, Tennessee right now. I'm an ER physician, and I've been practicing for the last 7.5 years. And a few years ago, I jumped into real estate investing, started as a limited partner, and then moved over to the general partnership side. I've loved being an active partner, and I also love being a limited partner and passive investor in the deals as well. And I'm excited to just kind of share the journey, all the good, the bad, the ugly, and just kind of say how I got here today.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's been quite the journey. How have things been practicing emergency medicine in Nashville?
It's been fantastic. I graduated from residency, and this is my first job out of residency. And it was a community hospital, and it still is until 4 months ago when we took on our first set of residents. And it's been an awesome practice. One, my colleagues have become family because they've, since I finished residency, it's been the first place I worked. But more than that, it has been a place that I have grown. I love the practice of emergency medicine, and I've gotten to develop my skills. I still get to do the same awesome things that I did in residency. I still get to do them today. I get to save lives. I get to make a difference, and I've loved it every step of the way. And now it's different because now I'm also a teacher, teaching new residents, just what it is to love emergency medicine, to do it well, to grow in the field.
That's awesome. How has kind of that transition been from residency to attending to now faculty and teaching residents? How has that been for you?
It's been interesting. It's been good. And I'll say this, when I got out, I didn't think I was going to be a faculty. I didn't think I was going to teach. I went to a community hospital, but as it so happened, our program became a residency program. And I chose to be faculty because I felt like I could impart some knowledge into the younger generation, because the truth is they're going to be the ones taking care of me, and they're going to be the ones that are going to take care of my parents. And so just to be able to make a difference in their lives, to be able to teach them, to watch them grow, I think is just an awesome thing. And the thing about that is that my skills will never die. So as I teach, I'll continue to learn, and I'll continue to know cutting edge technology, anything that's cutting edge in emergency medicine, because that's what they need to know. And so that's what I need to know as well. So I have loved, so far, it's been great. The questions that you think are no-brainers, you realize that they don't know. And so you have to pause, you have to step back, and then you just have to you have to reteach everything so that they can learn it. And I love it. And I didn't know that I would, but I really do love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to teach as well. It's just really fun. We have some students rotate with us from time to time for a few weeks, and it's humbling to have that opportunity to get to teach. But it's also crazy, at least every time for me, for the most part, especially if it's like a third year med student in their first rotation. We have some PA students and NP students come through. Every time two things happen. One, I'm kind of amazed at how much I've grown since I was in their shoes, because I still feel like it was yesterday. And then also I'm constantly surprised at just how smart these folks are and how on top of things they are. And like you said, all the new kind of cutting edge things that they bring up or remind me of. And I'm like, oh, let me read more about that and get back to you. And so it definitely makes you motivated to stay on
Yes.
top of things for sure.
You're constantly learning,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. What's a funny story or a good story from the ER that sticks out that's happened recently? Everybody loves a good patient story.
Ooh.
Sorry, I should have prepped you for this question.
Recently, I was in a patient's room. We get our fair share. This one was funny, but not really. But we get our fair share of psychs and drunks and drugs. That's just the name of the game. And I walked in to talk to this guy who was under the influence of who knows what. He says, I didn't use anything. I didn't do anything. It's what he's like, I didn't do anything. And I'm like, you can't keep your eyes open. And then before I know it, he pulls his pants down, turns in the corner, and just starts peeing in the corner. And I was like, I could get mad, but like, he doesn't even know what's going on right now. Like,
Yep.
he's not there. And so I just walked out. I said, I'll come back later. And that's like, and that is the cleanest of all the stories. Let me tell you, Alec, that is the
Oh, I
cleanest of
bet.
all the stories. But
Yeah.
it's never a dull moment. I wish I participated in the doctors because I have a ton of stories to tell you about
Yeah.
that.
Well, it still exists. For folks who are wondering what Doctors is, I have not talked about that on the show yet. So I will now. In residency, we had that like classic bulletin board where everyone would like print out a picture, it'd be like a snippet of a patient encounter note that was really funny. I'm a firm believer of like a patient says something funny, I got to put it in quotes in the chart because I enjoy reading it in the future. And I know like the specialists love reading it too. So anyways, we would print that out and we would print out foreign body objects and so forth. And so my buddy Ben and I, shout out to Ben Prince, if you're listening to this, started a Instagram page called Doctors. And on Fridays, we would do Foreign Body Fridays. And so we would put an image of something in some orifice of the body and people would guess on it. And it was a hit. I think the Instagram still exists. We don't post on it actively, but we had like 2,000 followers or something really quickly. And we're like, wow. And we had a TV production company, actually, whoever works through TLC reached out to us and they wanted to do a show that was about Foreign Body Friday. And essentially the premise behind it was going to be exactly as it seemed. And it was going to be dramatized. And then the crowd would guess, or the viewer would guess what the object was. And then you'd find out at the end. It was ridiculous. And so they reached out to us and we talked a couple of times on the phone. And I worked at a military hospital and they wanted to just film in a military hospital, which wasn't going to happen. And so long story short, that fell through. We offered for us to host it. And then we never heard back, but apparently the show exists. I think it's called Stuck or something like that. And it was on TLC or one of these A&E or something. But yeah, so I'm sure that you could have contributed to Doctors greatly,
Oh,
especially.
a ton. Like the things we
Yeah.
see, and I work at a not so great part of town. So like we really see, I'm so grateful for the opportunities, the things that I've been able to use my hands to do. A lot of us will talk about it and will understand it, but you can't really explain it to someone who hasn't been in our shoes. And so the difference we get to make, to be able to even like till today, to be able to touch a heart is just the neatest thing. To be able to just like, even the small things like sit down with a loved one and tell them that their loved one is dead. Like I said, some of them are good opportunities, some of them are not so great opportunities. So to be able to like walk all those different aspects, I think is just so neat to be in the ER, to be able to like deliver a baby. It's also just as neat. I'm so grateful that like this is the path that I'm on and I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget just what an incredible privilege it is to be a doctor. And we get kind of wrapped up in the difficult things of the job. And we sometimes
Yes.
forget that the patient's what matters and those experiences that we get to have and those relationships we get to build are absolutely incredible and just life
Yeah.
changing, not only for the patient, but also for us as the docs.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to forget that and lose that, especially in our circles of real estate and investing and trying to figure out like, hey, how can we practice medicine and live life how we want to? We sometimes miss that sometimes. And I absolutely love the patient care. And I know we talked about this before. just love the patient care aspect of things. It's some of the other things that make medicine a little bit more difficult and
Yep. Yep.
unsatisfying. But I think if you really focus on those experiences and those moments, it just makes it all just so worth it for sure.
I agree. I 100% agree with that.
It is a privilege. Well, that's awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that story. Hopefully no more public urinations or anything like that in the ER for the next couple of days for you.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's kind of pivot, if you don't mind, into real estate. So
Yeah.
how did you get introduced to real estate and real estate investing?
Okay, so it was a few years ago. It was around the pandemic, and as you know, the pandemic was very difficult for everyone, but especially us in the ER. And at that time, I noticed a few things. Our hours were getting cut in the beginning of COVID. We were not working anywhere close to full time. And even more than that, two of our colleagues were fired just on the spot, they said. And we never thought physicians would ever get fired. But it happened, and it made me realize that even a field as altruistic as medicine, that our jobs were unstable. And so because of that, needed to figure out other sources of income, other ways to grow wealth, because I didn't know if I would be next on the chopping block, honestly. And so that's how it started. I'd already been in stocks and I already maxed out my 401k because I thought it was important. But I knew about real estate, but I didn't really get into it. And so around that time, I started researching and I started looking for alternative assets, different ways to grow wealth, what that could look like. And so I looked into real estate. I looked a little bit into oil and gas. I looked at just really different routes. I looked at assisted living. Funny enough, I did. I looked at even thinking about buying businesses. I thought about that. I thought about a bunch of ventures and I decided to invest in real estate. I was on the sidelines for a while. I didn't jump in right away because I was initially very risk averse, but I asked questions. I did research. And then one day, at the right opportunity, I invested in a deal. And that deal did really well. I started getting distributions. But what I did was I started learning about the business. And I started really understanding what it meant to be a passive investor. So every time it would send me monthly updates, I would learn about the property. Every time they would send me quarterly financial statements, I would read about it. I would ask questions because I really wanted to know. I wanted to truly feel like part owner. And even though I wasn't making any decisions, that didn't matter to me. I was still learning. And so I understood that. I would ask for a T12 and I'd say, okay, what does this mean? Can someone explain this to me? I'd call the owners. And then another deal came and I was like, you know what, this went so well, I'm going to do another one. And I felt strongly about this, that the 7% return I was getting on that particular deal was more than the 0.03% that I was getting sitting in my savings account. I'm not lying, guys. And so I knew that my one distribution check was more than my entire year of savings account, of the money sitting in my savings account, my interest. And so I knew that I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. And I needed to stop saving. I'm not saying not to save. I still had my emergency fund, but I did not feel that additional money needed to be sitting in the bank anymore. And so I figured that, another deal came and I invested in that deal. And I was getting returns on that as well. But what started happening is that the people around me, my colleagues, my friends, my family started asking and they're like, hey, tell us a little bit about this. And I was like, you guys, we all need to be doing this. That's how it started. It was this hunger and thirst for more. And then finding that out was just how I started as a limited partner. And we can get into how I transitioned even more. But I saw a need and I learned how to fix that problem. And I loved it. It's opened up tons of doors for me. And I'm so grateful for it. And clearly, that's why you and I are sitting here today talking about this. But it's been an exciting journey. But I have learned tremendously. And I realized that this is the reason why, if you ask me, why did I go from, LP to GP? The reason why is because I wanted to bridge the gap. I realized that, in medicine, we know how to do medicine really well. You can wake me up in my sleep and I'll put in a central line. But initially, I didn't know a lot about finance. And I realized that financial literacy was something that I wanted to bridge the gap to bring to our fellow healthcare professionals because it was lacking. We knew medicine well, but we didn't really know how to manage our finances. And we went from making pennies to becoming high income earners. What do you do with that? And that's really why I felt that, I could move from the LP to a GP, and we can talk about that. But that really is the basis. So long story short, that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. That's a great story. What were some resources initially that you used that kind of gave you some confidence to invest in that first deal?
Oh, good question. So I read a lot. I'm just going to be honest. I did a ton of reading, and I found bigger pockets online. I will say that. And I signed up for that. That was one of the resources that initially that helped me. Even before I knew anything, I was just like, what is this? And then I went to some local Tennessee real estate or local RIA, a real estate investment association. I think I might be wrong with the acronyms, but I joined those, and I just went to, I remember they would have meetings and they would have monthly meetups where you just came and hung out, happy hour. And then at that point, there were tons of Zoom. So I went on meetup.com and I would just learn, like, if there was anything going on in the area. Sometimes it was like one or two or three people that just talked about real estate. And I did whatever I could to learn. That was the initial, that was because there's a big difference between being an LP and a GP. And when I decided to make that jump, my education and all of that was a lot more. But in the beginning, I was just looking for people who were kind of interested in real estate that I could learn from and that I could attach myself to.
That's awesome. What did that first deal look like? Was it a multifamily property? Where was it
Mhm.
located?
It
What
was,
were some fears you had going into that?
oh my goodness, tons. Okay. I will tell you, it was a multifamily apartment. It was in South Carolina. I was nervous because the initial investment was 50,000. And to me, that seemed like a lot of money. And I was like, the biggest thing was the risk. What if I lost all the money? Like I was like, oh, OMG, this was like the biggest thing in the world. And then you realize it's not. But in the beginning, when you don't know, it seems like it's such a big investment, and and you always think about the negative. So you're always like, well, what if I lose it? But then you don't think about all the benefits of it. And that was honestly, that was my biggest fear. I also felt like, well, how can I invest in a place that I don't know, in a building I've never seen? But what I did was I reached out to the sponsors. And this is something I will tell you as a limited partner, as a passive investor, when you're thinking about investing, there is nothing wrong. No questions are off the table. Because even if I said, like, at that point, I felt like it was a lot of money, and it is still a lot of money. And it's your hard earned money. So I was like, I asked every single question that I could. I asked them, what if this happens? At that point, I didn't understand, how really illiquid it was. So I was like, well, what happens if I want to get it out tomorrow? I asked all the questions, and I made sure I said, have you guys been to the property? Have you seen the property? I asked them to explain what the due diligence process was to me. I asked all the questions, but that's because I was a newbie. And also, maybe somehow I thought I wanted to pursue this long term. And maybe that's why I was more detailed in the questions that I asked. But every time that they had a webinar about the deal, I would join in, I would ask questions. And even more than that, I was just learning. I was eager to learn, and I wanted to fully understand what the money was doing. I wanted to get a grasp on where it was going exactly. I wanted to understand what the breakdown was, like what 70/30 means, or what 7% cash on cash means. Like, how really did that translate to distributions and earnings? So those are things that I truly was curious about it in the beginning. And I wasn't afraid to ask any questions. I really felt like if they couldn't answer my question, or if they were too afraid, then maybe they were not the people that I wanted to partner with.
Yeah, I think that is so important. That last statement there, all of it was incredibly important. But if they can't answer your question, or if they're not willing to find the answer to your question, that's a deal you need to run away from, because you should be able to ask any question, no matter how big, no matter how small, because you're investing your hard earned money into that deal. And so the sponsor owes it to you to find the answer to that question, or yeah, it's not the deal for you. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Those are some great tips for folks. If people are not familiar with a syndication, what is an LP? What is a GP? What's the difference?
Okay, good question. So in a syndication, we pool money together, we pool resources in order to buy these large properties that you see. So these apartment complexes that are 100, 200, 300. And a limited partner is exactly that. So you are bringing capital into the deal, but you are not making day-to-day decisions. The GP team, which is the general partnership team, is a team that's made up of people who raise money, people who sign on the loan, people who manage a deal on a day-to-day basis, and they make up the general partnership team. And they are the ones who are making decisions on a day-to-day basis. So as a limited partner, it's truly a passive investment, which means you are doing zero work. All you're doing, which is a lot of work, where you're still bringing the capital to the deal, but you're not fielding calls, you're not taking care of tenants, you're doing nothing. You're just watching your hard-earned money work for you. This is what it means when you can go to bed and know that your money's still working for you. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, that's a perfect way. And I think in terms of trying to decide which one you want to be, it just depends on how involved do you want to be, how passive do you want your cash flow to be, because it's definitely a spectrum of passivity, and least passive is going to be that GP where you're like running the deal, you're finding the property, your boots on the ground. And LP is going to be your least passive, where you're just making that mailbox money, which is beautiful. But, that extra work to be more the GP side probably leads to some higher compensation and return. So it's just kind of
100%.
figuring out what will work. Yeah. Doctors are really interested in being LPs because we have a really busy job and we want to spend time with family, and we have all these other things that we're doing. And so being an LP as a physician is a great way to get started, because it's exactly as you said, you're learning kind of the ropes on, hey, how do we run these properties? How do we run property management? How do we raise money for deals? What are the tax benefits? All these things, you're learning that as a limited partner by asking great questions like you were doing, to then maybe potentially take that jump into the GP world in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is awesome. So how many deals did you invest in as an LP?
3.
Awesome. And were those all in South Carolina, or were they in different
No,
markets?
no, they were in different markets. They were South Carolina, Baltimore, Maryland, and Iowa.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah, all over the place. All apartment buildings?
Yes, all apartment buildings. Yeah.
Very cool. And was it the same sponsor? The same?
No,
Okay.
different.
Yeah. That's
I wanted to try out different spots, but they weren't random. That I can tell you that much. I built solid relationships with both groups because I thought like I said, this is a partnership. This is a big deal. So I really wanted to know as much as I could about the team, how they were running it. I looked at their prior deals. I looked at how they ran their business. Those things are very, very important to me. So even if it was more than one sponsor, I equally knew them just as well.
That's great. Yeah. And I think real estate is just all about relationships and networking. And just, we were talking about before we recorded this, how just one conversation can change your life. And it's just really true. And so you never know what's going to come out of even just analyzing a deal and hopping on a webinar with someone, whether you invest or not. You just never know what that's going to lead to in the future. And it's all just learning opportunities, as we like to say in medicine.
I'll say this. Since I started this journey a few years ago, I've probably met people that I think I'll probably know for the rest of my life. That's how cool this whole journey has been. Like, just like Alex said, you meet some of the coolest people. You meet people who have a different mindset of how things should be done. You meet people who think differently about life, about where they're heading to, about purpose. It's such a neat way to think and live, and to be able to link arms with them. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I'm so grateful for that, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not only just changing your life, but it's also everyone that you come in contact to. And
Yes.
I mean, you're teaching residents now. I'm sure those residents are leaving that ER understanding a lot more about finances and real estate than probably all of us ever did when we
Yeah.
got out of medicine or got out of medical school and residency. So I'm sure that they're benefiting from that as well, which is really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's kind of talk about, if you don't mind, the pivot from LP to GP, from limited partner to general partner. What was that like?
Oh, that was fun. So I didn't know from the get-go that I was going to eventually become a general partner and become active. I loved it from the get-go. I was so excited. I was so enthralled. And just the principles behind it and the way to truly build wealth and to help others do the same. I found that so fascinating. And it was especially important for me as a physician because I really felt that at some point, we start doing our jobs because it's a means to an end. And we lose sight of the reason why we're doing it in the first place. And I felt deep in my heart that if we could find a way to grow wealth outside of medicine, then we would reignite that passion that we all had from the beginning. I really felt that maybe that's a naive way to think. I'm okay with that. But that's really how I felt. I felt passionate about helping them hold on to that passion. That's when I realized that I wanted to transition. And this was something that really helped me. And I'll tell you about the transition. But I felt like pivoting was not like forsaking medicine. I felt like it was stacking on what I already knew and the principles that I held on to. And so when I thought about it that way, I had peace about it. And I realized that my identity was not stuck in medicine. I could be a physician, and I've talked about this. I can be a physician and I can be a real estate investor. And one doesn't negate the other or take away from the other. That was liberating for me in order to pursue active investing with all of my heart. So when I realized that's what I wanted to do, I wholeheartedly invested in myself. I grew personally. I really invested in personal development, in growing as a person, in knowing who I was, in like a solid foundation. And then I got mentorship. I had a business mentor. I started off with a personal coach and a business mentor. And I wanted them to teach me solid foundation on what it is to run a business, what that should look like, and then how to grow as a person if I was really going to walk this path, which was steward other people's wealth. That was the biggest thing for me. And that was the biggest foundation. And I remember my business mentor, he told me that I needed to go read Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And he said that he would not meet with me again until I had read that book and until I had written down my why, because he told me that things will get difficult and things will get hard. And if you don't know your why, if you are not rooted and grounded in that you would not be able to weather the storm. And that was so crucial for me. I would get mad. I'd text him. I'd be like, he goes, have you finished? I'm like, no, not yet. I'm going to finish next week. He's like, okay, get back to me when you're done reading. But I'm so, so grateful for that, because now even with the volatility of the market, it doesn't matter because I know my why and I know the fundamentals. And those two things were so important for me that I can see past this as a way to weather the storm. So I'll say that. So I transitioned, and I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that I wanted to empower other healthcare professionals, other physicians to grow wealth. And I felt strongly that it was through apartment real estate investing. I understood the business plan. I understood the fundamentals, and I knew that you really could help tenants. You could better their lives by improving the property. And then investors could also benefit from that with long-term appreciation. And I knew that the transition would be long-term. So I wasn't looking at it as a get-rich-quick scheme for my investors or for myself. That's how I was looking at it. I knew it was going to be long-term, and I knew that was the journey. But I read a ton of books. I read a ton of real estate-focused books on apartment investing, on syndication, on what that looked like. And that was the initial beginning. And then I started going to conferences because I knew that I needed to network with other real estate investors to figure out really how they're doing, because I knew eventually that they would become my partners. That's another step that I took. And I told you about, I was big on mentorship because I realized that if you learn from someone who was 6 months, 9 months, a year, 3 years ahead of you, you could learn significantly more. And the mistakes that they made, you don't necessarily have to make it. I can't remember who told me this, but it stuck with me. Wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes so that you don't have to make them yourself. That's always been my mindset. So those are the steps that I took. And when I felt I was not 100% ready, but I built Phoenix, and I felt strongly that this was the path that I was going to go on. And so even before I had a deal, I knew that this would be where I was going. So I started a company, Phoenix Capital Investment, and it started with just me. And I said, okay, I'm going to learn how to run this business. I'm going to learn all the ins and outs and go from there. I went to meetups. I went to underwriting classes. I went to webinars, anything that I could get my hands on. I did some short-term intensives in the beginning. So like 3-day course on capital raising, a 3-day course on acquisition, really how to acquire properties. I did a boot camp with Bigger Pockets in the beginning, and then I did a 12-week accelerator program to learn how to really just how to jump into multifamily real estate investing. So there was a heavy investment on my part in the beginning, but I knew that that was really important in order for me to learn, in order for me to grow, so that at the right time when the right deal came, I would know how to manage it. I would know the right partners to link up with. And in all of this, I was meeting people. Like I said, I was networking with people. I was learning how people ran their businesses, because I knew in the beginning I wouldn't buy a property on my own, at least not the type of properties that I knew I envisioned myself getting or a team getting. And so I knew that in the beginning, I would partner with other GPs, other general partnership teams to buy properties together. And that was the route that I went. But as I grew, the biggest thing that has helped me today is I realized that, in order to go far, I needed people. What I meant by that is that I started focusing on building my own team. That was the biggest, because I knew that I was going to grow and I knew I was meant to grow. I could not do it alone. So Phoenix was never going to be an Nkem thing. I was going to find solid partners, find the team and grow with them. And then that has been the coolest, most interesting, just like transition where like I have people who look up to me and who are like, we're going to grow together. And they bought into my vision. I just think that that's the neatest thing in the world. So in a long, rounded way, I hope I answered your question.
No, you absolutely did. And it was a really inspiring story for sure. And so cool. A couple of questions I think that came out of that was, you mentioned you started the company before you're ready. Do you
Yes.
think if you were waiting until you were going to be ready, do you think you ever would have actually started Phoenix Capital Investment?
I would never have started it, because you will never be 100% ready, because you can't predict the future. You don't even know what you don't know until you jump in and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't know that. And I need to know that. This is something I learned. And I'll say this in medicine, because it's medicine and lives are at stake, you're afraid to fail, and failure is not accepted, because yes, lives really are at stake. But here, I felt like I could try things. And if they didn't work, I didn't really necessarily see them as failure. I just realized that I needed to either pivot, or I needed to use that as like a stepping stone to get me to success or to get me to winning or growth. So for that reason alone, I wasn't afraid to start, because I knew, I was like, okay, if that doesn't go right, I'll figure out something. Even creating an LLC, like even something as like small as that, I was like, well, we're going to learn it together. I'm going to figure it out. And yes, there are different ways to do it. There are different strategy. And if you have the resources, then you don't even need to, a lot of these things you can pay and you can get the right people to do it. But that should not stop you from doing. So if you're listening to this thinking, I don't have all the resources, you don't have to. Like we have the internet, we have ChatGPT, we have all the things today that really can assist you to help you get to where you are. But I would not wait. You don't even know what 100% ready is. Like you think you know what 100%, but you really don't. So when you're about, I think I say 70% is my number. And that's how I felt when I was 70% ready. I knew that it was time to do it. And there were so many things I didn't know, but I know that this is a journey and there's not a destination. I just knew that I was on the path and it was a journey, and I just needed to put one foot in front of the other.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing I've noticed throughout talking with you is one, your positive attitude, but also your humility and your willingness to reach out for help in multiple different ways. Books, right? Like $20, you can buy a book and it's all the wisdom and knowledge of like any mind you could ever want. And they've made those mistakes. So that's an easy, cheap way to get started in real estate and learn from these experts. Mentorship, coaching. I mean, like you said, you're gaining that wisdom, which is going to expedite your growth. So sure, you might be paying a little bit upfront for that coaching and mentorship, but you're saving years in terms of how fast you're going to be able to expedite your growth and your investments. And so I think that's really important too. And then of course, positive attitude makes all the difference as well. But yeah, it's just really important that I think those are little things that sometimes get missed of like, hey, it doesn't have to be buying the most expensive course that exists.
No.
It can be buying a few bigger pockets books, reaching out to people who are just a little bit in front of you, who are going to pull you up along on this journey. Because one thing that we've learned is, and I feel like this is a little bit different than medicine. In medicine, there's definitely that hierarchy, attending,
Yeah.
the senior resident, the intern, the med student. And I mean, I remember being the intern scrubbing in on surgeries, holding the retractor, being like, nobody cares about me. I can't say anything. And I'm shaking. And I'm in this really awkward position, right? We've all been there in medicine, but in real estate, it's just so much more accommodating and welcoming. And there's people that want to help you hold that retractor. And there's a
Yes.
surgeon who wants to talk to you. It's just an environment, I feel like, especially in like the physician real estate community, that just wants to help build each other up and help everybody be better. And so anyways, that was my
I agree.
tangent for the night. But
And no, it's a fantastic tangent because everything you said is completely true. Completely, completely true. I wouldn't be here today without all the hands that helped me along the way, that pulled me up, that like in the beginning, that just had conversations with me, that just sat, like that would take 30 minutes of their Zoom time to just say, these are the things I did. Like I was like writing, like now I have this nice, remarkable here. But like before that, I was writing on paper and I was like, just like taking all this information and they were willing to, you think that like people give money, but really when people give you their time, it's so delicate. It means more to them because they'll get that money back. They can never get that time back.
exactly.
So to me, I think to be able to like sit down with people and just like pick their brain or learn what they did, like I completely agree with everything that you said. It's just people being able to pick you up, to help you, to lend a helping hand and that's okay. This is the thing. It's that abundance mindset because it's the fact that like there is plenty for all of us. And so that way it's not competition. It's not striving. It's like, I can bring you alongside me because like, I can't finish everything that's in front of me. There's plenty for all of us. I think that's what it is. I think that's what differentiates a lot of people in this industry is that mindset. And that will move you forward because people just help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a team effort and the whole team wins. And that's what it's all
Yes.
about. I think about that. We've raised some money on our latest deal. That was the first time we raised money for an investment property. And gosh, like what an honor it was to steward someone's
Yes.
hard-earned money into an investment that we found and give them a fantastic return. It was just such an honor. And I think about, that aspect of it, but also for me, like I offer, and anyone listening to this, like you can go on Physicians and Properties and book a free call with me. And I love it. I've probably talked to like 75 people over this last year on my ride home from work. And it's been so much fun
Wow.
to just chat with doctors or whoever signs up on there, honestly, about all kinds of different things and strategize and talk about game plans. And it's just been really fun for me. And those relationships have just been so much fun to develop
Yeah.
and learn from. And it's completely free. I don't expect anything. I don't want anything. I just
No.
enjoy the
No.
relationships because that's what it's all about. Because people have done that for me too. So
Yeah,
super
it's
cool.
true. Very true.
Yeah. What is Phoenix Capital Investments? What are you guys working on right now there at Phoenix?
Oh, good question. So right now we are with our newest hire was an acquisition associate. And so we are really going heavy, boots on the ground, looking for deals. There's the two things that we're doing right now is we are actively looking for deals and we're strongly building our team. If I want to be honest, those are the areas that we're actively working on. And so her role is to really interface with brokers on a daily basis. We're underwriting more deals now with her since she joined the team. And that's just going to be able to help us scale. As I'm doing that, we're building the team. So one of the roles that I'm trying to fill right now is an operations manager. So someone who can manage the company at a higher level. And that's just, like I said before, and I meant it, when you're thinking long distance or you're thinking far, it's a team approach and we won't get there without it. So that's one of the biggest things that we're working on right now is just those two things.
That's awesome. Where are you guys looking for investments?
We're in the Southeast. So like I told you guys, I'm in Tennessee. So that is, and the national market is growing it like just rapidly. So we're looking in the surrounding MSA. We're also looking at Georgia and the Carolinas. So close areas, but still really thriving market.
That's awesome. And then what's kind of your buy box? Are you guys looking for a certain number of units or a certain level of rehab or what's that look like for folks?
So we are looking for 100 units and above. I told you where we're looking. We're looking at Class B, B minus, some C plus, really looking for 1980s and above. And we're looking for not heavy rehab. We're looking for like moderate value add. That is our business plan.
Very cool. That's awesome. If folks are interested in investing with you, how can they reach out to you?
I am big on LinkedIn. I just think it's such a cool professional network, and people grow and you learn so much. So if you're not on LinkedIn, you should get on LinkedIn. But I'm on LinkedIn. If you just type in my name, Nkem Ezeamama, you'll find me. And I think in the show notes, you see my name. Our website is www.phcinvest.com. And if you shoot me, my first name at phcinvest.com is my email address. So any of those ways you'll be able to get a hold of me. But on the website, after you fill out just a little bit of information, you can schedule a call with me. And I'm happy to like talk to you, whether or not it's about investment. If it's like questions, concerns that you have, I'd love to field them.
Awesome. Yeah, you are crushing the LinkedIn game. It's awesome to see. I just signed up for LinkedIn a couple months ago, and that's where I first saw you on the platform. And you're just crushing it. It's so cool to see your posts and your videos and just how much engagement. And yeah, we'll have to talk offline about tips and tricks on that because you're just
I
doing great.
got
So
you. I
yeah,
got
yeah,
you.
it's been cool. Cool to see. Well, one other thing, I don't want to take too much of your time, but one thing that I thought was really interesting that you're doing is mentoring young women and teaching them the value of leadership and business development. And I wanted to touch on that because I think it's hugely important.
Okay. So this was very important to me because I remember maybe my first meetup. No, it wasn't my first. Maybe my second or third meetup in Nashville. I walked into the room and it was all men, and I was the only woman in the room. And I stood at the door and I thought to myself, did anyone see me? Can I just sneak out? But I told myself this, and I knew that this journey was going to be difficult for multiple reasons. But I told myself that if there was not a seat for me at the table, I would pull up my own chair and I would bring up another chair and bring up another woman. And that was what I told myself. And I realized that at where I was, I could not start there. I needed to start lower. And what I mean by that is I needed to start with girls. And that became something that was very important for me. I wanted little girls to see that, we can be anything that we put our minds to, and that if we work hard for it, that we can level the playing field. That was the biggest thing for me. And I felt like, so it started with going to schools and just like after school programs, nothing, we're still building it out. But it just starts with like going to after school programs and just teaching girls that like, you can start a business, like whatever it is, whether it's selling lemonade, whether it's like selling scrunchies, whether it's selling slushy, like the
Yeah,
things, like
yeah,
whatever it is, you can start somewhere and grow from there. But it has a lot to do with mindset and, it's like how we're raised, whatever the culture is, but being able to debunk some of that, in as much as you're teaching them, yes, you can sell lemonade. It's the mindset behind it that also needs to be changed. And that's where I'm really passionate about because it's so neat to see other women investors, to see other females who are doing it alongside me. And I just know that there's still so much room to grow and we can start lower.
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that you're inspiring so many young girls. And I think it's so cool too, because you come at it from the angle of a physician, which is inspiring and certainly very inspiring doing emergency medicine. Also, a business owner and real estate investor, and it's just really cool. So I'm sure that you're inspiring lots of folks. Is there any way that folks listening can help you out with that in that journey to inspire more young women to get involved in business or kind of flip their mindset to help with that?
Yes. So just like reach out to me and then we'll share kind of like we're in the beginning phases, but we're creating an outreach and we're starting with schools in Nashville. So if you reach out to me, like I'll give you more information, especially if you're local. I would so love that because this is not a one woman effort. The more arms, the more people that we can link together, I think it's going to grow.
Absolutely. Teamwork and relationships, just like we've been talking
Mhm.
about the whole time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else we didn't hit on that you'd like to discuss?
No, this was such a great evening. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm so glad that it worked out and like the hour flew by.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We'll have to bring you back sometime, but really excited to follow along on your journey. Folks, definitely reach out on LinkedIn to Nkem and see what she's doing. It's awesome. And then she's also on Instagram as well. So we'll have all the links in the show notes. So be sure to follow along, especially if you want just a good smile and some good knowledge. Because like I said, very positive and great message that you have out there. Keep doing big things, and excited to follow along with your journey.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Well, with that, it's been Nkem and Alex with another episode of the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.